Well, I asked and you guys voted. So far we've covered an old first-person shooter, an old space sim RPG, and today we're tackling an old RTS game, Nexus The Jupiter Incident. This is actually one I've been looking to tackle for quite some time, as it's been recommended to me numerous times. In the game you play as Marcus Cromwell, a famed spaceship captain and son of Richard Cromwell, the first human born in space. While investigating some shenanigans around Jupiter, Cromwell is whisked away to a distant human colony and caught up in an epic interstellar conflict between several alien civilizations perpetuated by the mysterious mechanoids, whom Cromwell must defeat when they capture Earth. Nexus The Jupiter Incident was developed by the Hungarian-based Mythos Entertainment. Originally the developer was working on the third installment in the Imperium Galactica series, but ultimately that project never happened, and so Mythos kept the momentum going by retooling what they had done and creating Nexus The Jupiter Incident. Rather than the typical RTS model of acquiring resources and building bases, Nexus instead has the player taking control of a small number of capital ships for a series of missions, with an emphasis on tactics and ship management. It's a notable change which makes it quite unique within the genre. Presentation-wise, this game holds up extremely well, although a lot of that may be thanks to an HD remaster from a few years ago. While the graphics are certainly of the time, they look really great overall. There's a hell of a lot of detail in every ship, with the focus on ship operations resulting in lots of subtle, cool animations when it comes to the weapons and fighter deployment. The lavish space backgrounds are the game's real visual strength. Everything feels so vast, like you really are in space rather than a contained map. Although because of how big these levels are and the relative perspective between your ship and the environment, sometimes the camera can be a little disorienting. The weakest part of the game visually is probably the character models, as they seem a little bit dead-eyed, but it's not really a huge problem considering you don't see them very often, and this is compensated for by the really terrific voice acting.
We've remained invisible for far longer than before. Did you change your diet?
Actually, Captain,
I have studied the rudiments of her technique and improved upon them by boosting the effectiveness of our wave amplifiers and light absorbers. In a couple of hours, the ship will be able to emulate Ghost technology perfectly. If Commander Sweetwater allows me to study her implants, I can also copy those. It appears the majority are organic in origin.
Captain, tell your cyber pet that my brain is off limits. I'm not having her use it as a science lab.
I am not a cyber pet. I am an AI with a fully integrated personality.
Sounds about right. If AI stands for anal retentive ignoramus, that is.
That's enough. Angel is an essential member of our crew, Commander Sweetwater. She's just as entitled to your respect as everyone else. I won't stand for any more bickering. The duration and effectiveness of our camouflage has increased, and for now, that's all that counts.
The performances from pretty much everyone here are really top-notch, and the cast of characters offer a lot of fun as well. Even though they may be disembodied voices most of the time, there's a lot of great dialogue and an enjoyable chemistry between them all. The highlight of the game's presentation, though, is undoubtedly the soundtrack composed by Tomas Craner. For a game about capital ships blasting the crap out of each other, the music is incredibly eerie, haunting, and even creepy. Lots of ambient, unsettling tones accompanied by these distant, slightly distorted vocals. It really adds a layer of majesty to the whole experience, and combined with the sheer size of the environments, it can really put your super intense space battles into perspective. It creates a feeling of space itself being quite scary and intimidating, and the prospect of having to leave your ship in the event of its destruction pretty terrifying. Another strong aspect of the game is the design work. While some of the alien ships are a bit generic, all of the human-centric designs in the hero ship, the Angel Wing, are instantly iconic. The Stiletto class in particular has a real Omega-class destroyer from Babylon 5 vibe to it, and the Angel Wing is the only one of its kind, made all the more special thanks to the player's customization. Which brings me to the gameplay side of things. As I mentioned, this game is much more focused on ship management and tactics rather than resources and base building. In fact, there are no resources or base building mechanics at all. In place of those mechanics are the ship configuration options before every mission. Here you can swap out different weapons, devices, equip yourself with fighter squadrons, marines, or gunships, and generally do your best to have your ships fit the mission depending on the objectives. During combat, you have 3 different weapons: shield draining weapons, which naturally drain shields, hull destroying weapons, which are pretty self-explanatory, and precision lasers to disable devices on board enemy ships. There's also some heavy weapons in all 3 of these categories for some extra punch. Generally, you'll want a balance of all 3 weapon types, as any one of them on their own isn't all that great. Bringing down enemy shields is fine, but those weapons don't do anything against a hull, and while you can disable enemy ships with lasers, the question is, can you do it before they blast you out of the sky? On top of this, there's energy management. You have to make sure you have the energy cells and generators which can actually power the weapons and devices you're equipping. Otherwise, you'll run out of juice pretty fast. And the game does not forgive any mistakes or hold your hand for any of this. If you forget to equip your ship with certain weapons, the game will let you flounder uselessly in space until you're destroyed. It may sound like a lot of busy work and micromanagement, but that's actually the strength of the game. At times it almost feels like a puzzle game. You can be playing missions getting completely thrashed, forcing you to replay many times over, but then when you find the right combination of weapons, devices, and squadrons, combined with the right tactics and timing, you can steamroll enemies who seemed impossibly tough beforehand, and it's immensely satisfying. The mechanics also help endear you to this world and the characters. The Angel Wing goes from a glorified cargo transport to a state-of-the-art battle cruiser with a diverse crew and heaps of special abilities, and because a lot of that is down to your own efforts as a player, it really makes it feel like this is your ship. The mechanics can even endear you to many other ships in your fleet as well. The 2 escort destroyers Brutus and Sparta were my go-to guys for punching well above their weight, taking on ships which were completely out of their class and still surviving. Although I did end up going through about 3 of each, so perhaps they're more like the Eagles from Space 1999 rather than DS9's Defiant. The level of detail in the combat though is what made this possible. As opposed to other games in which the only way to win is to destroy everything, in Nexus, once a ship has taken enough of a beating, it automatically triggers an evacuation of the crew. With enemy ships you can be merciless and set your ship to shoot down enemy escape pods, but you can also swoop in to pick up friendly escape pods as well, to ensure you aren't losing any valuable commanders who could lead the next iteration of their ship. This intricacy in combat is what allows the player to be so creative with their strategies. You could be whittling down several enemy ships at once to disable each one before mopping them up, focusing fire on the biggest threat until it's a smouldering wreck, forcing the rest of the enemy fleet to retreat, ignoring enemy ships altogether in favour of accomplishing a more pressing primary objective. There are just so many different approaches you can take. Rarely is superior firepower or numbers the deciding factor in any engagement. In fact, most of the time you will be outnumbered on these missions. I think where this complexity can harm the experience though is when the scale of each conflict increases in scope. During the penultimate mission, you're in command of so many ships against so many enemies, trying to accurately manage your fleet and keep track of everything can be a bit overwhelming, not helped by the continuous feed of information giving you various warnings which mostly just state the obvious.
Warning, our squadrons are under attack.
Yes, I know my fighter squadrons are under attack. That's usually what happens when you order things into battle. You can mitigate this issue by grouping your ships together, but it can still feel quite chaotic at times. While the gameplay is top-notch, Nexus is let down a little bit in the story department, or more accurately with the plotting. Nexus tells a pretty standard but enjoyable space opera story. The universe is in that sweet spot of Babylon 5 or Mass Effect where it acknowledges the real science of space travel and combat, but has enough fictional elements to retain that Dan Dare style of space adventure. What makes most of this enjoyable and compelling are the character interactions. As Cromwell rises through the ranks and proves himself in battle, he clashes egos with Vice Admiral Norbank, who is clearly way up his own arse and dismissive of Cromwell's abilities. There's also Commander Sweetwater, whose big picture perspective often butts heads with Cromwell's command style. And then there's Angel, the illegal AI created by a shady corporation and functions as the ship's de facto science officer. It's nothing especially deep, but it's an exciting space opera story overall, which is unfortunately let down by the plotting. Missions are divided into episodes, 26 missions across 6 episodes. It's the break between these episodes which can be very jarring. During episode 1, for example, you investigate the shady corporate operations around Jupiter, eventually discovering the Angel Wing, Angel herself, and a mechanoid which you escape from by jumping through a wormhole. Then, abruptly, a captain's log from Cromwell just dumps this huge pile of exposition on you, explaining what they discovered on the other side, how the human colony was created, who all the alien factions are, their history, etc. It makes for a very oddly paced campaign. During missions, Cromwell, or rather the player, is the one who's pushing the story forward. But during these chapter breaks, suddenly we're the ones being pulled along by the story. If this were a TV show, it would be like missing an episode every now and then and only hearing about it through a previously on recap. Which is a shame, because judging by the writing for these characters and the obviously high amount of effort which went into the setting, the ingredients were there to tell a story where the protagonist and the player are a bit more active. Despite the shortcomings of the story though, Nexus The Jupiter Incident is honestly one of the most refreshing RTS experiences I've had in quite some time. The unique approach to its mechanics and smaller scale focus on a handful of capital ships results in some of the most engaging strategy game battles I've ever had. There was a sequel in development at Mythos and some crowdfunding attempts at expanding Nexus into a larger franchise, but unfortunately none of it came to pass. Which is a shame, because Nexus has some pretty cool ideas and some other RTS games could learn a thing or two from it. And if you're a fan of this genre, I'd highly recommend giving this one a go if you haven't already. It's available on Steam and GOG for a few bucks, and is well worth your time. Thank you for watching. If you like these videos, subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay up to date with all the new uploads. Feel free to like and share to help the channel grow. Also keep an eye on the community tab to help decide on the next video. Until next time, have a good one. This has been Rowan from SideQuest. Live long and prosper.